The great hall of the Nexus station floated in the empty space between three dying stars. It was old, older than most species in the galaxy could remember. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to drink in light, and the ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. 12 species sat in the circular chamber. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and for 10,000 years, they had decided the fate of every living thing in the known universe. They made laws. They started wars. They ended civilizations. And today, they were discussing a small blue planet at the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. Earth. Ambassador Veltus of the Sindari Empire stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like wet stone. His eyes were completely black, and when he smiled, his teeth were sharp like broken glass. "The humans are becoming a problem," Velthos said. His voice echoed through the hall. "Our scouts report they have split the atom. They are building machines that think. In perhaps 200 years, maybe less, they will discover faster than light travel. They will come into our space. They will want what we have." He pressed a button on his wrist, and a hologram of Earth appeared above the chamber. Blue oceans, green land, white clouds. It looked peaceful from this distance. "I propose we solve this problem now," Velthos continued, "before it becomes expensive. The Sindari fleet will handle the annexation. We will harvest their resources and assign their population to labor colonies. Simple, clean, efficient." Many of the council members nodded. The Sindari were the strongest military power in the galaxy. When they spoke, others listened. When they acted, others got out of the way. But one voice rose in opposition. "I must object." Elder Counselor Mithras slowly stood from his seat. He was the oldest being in the room, perhaps the oldest being still alive anywhere. His species had long ago evolved beyond physical bodies, and he appeared as a shape made of soft blue light. He was the keeper of records, the one who remembered everything that the galaxy wanted to forget. "You speak out of turn, Elder," Velthos said. There was warning in his voice. "I speak because I must." Mithras moved to the center of the chamber, his light flickering like a candle in wind. "I have watched humans for a long time. Since before they built their first cities. Since before they tamed fire. I have seen what they are, and I am afraid." Laughter filled the chamber. The representative from the Kasori hive made a clicking sound that meant amusement. The Velthri ambassador shook his massive head. Mithras ignored them all. He raised one hand made of light, and suddenly the hologram of Earth changed. Now it showed scenes from human history. War. Endless war. Humans fighting each other with sticks, then swords, then guns, then bombs that could destroy whole cities. The council watched as mushroom clouds rose over 2 human cities. They watched as humans rebuilt those cities within a generation. Disease. Plagues that killed millions. And then humans creating medicines, vaccines, cures. Fighting back against death itself. Disaster, earthquakes, floods, fires, famines. And always, the humans surviving, adapting, coming back stronger than before. "You see what I see," Mithras said quietly. "But you do not understand it. Let me explain. Every other species in this galaxy, when faced with extinction, has done one of 2 things. They surrender or they die. This is natural. But this is natural. This is logical." He turned to face Velthos directly. "Humans do neither. When you corner them, they do not give up. They do not accept defeat. They become something else. Something more dangerous than what they were before. They have a word for it in their languages. They call it spite. They will hurt themselves just to hurt you more. They will burn their own house down if it means you burn with them. You speak of primitives who still kill each other over which imaginary god is correct, Velthos said. They are barely out of their caves. What could they possibly do against the combined might of the 12? That is exactly what makes them dangerous, Mithras replied. They have spent their entire existence fighting, not against other species, against themselves. They have been at war since the moment they learned to hold a rock. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy they have developed has been tested in actual combat. They have been training for us without even knowing we exist. The council was silent now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked bored. But none of them looked convinced. I call for a vote, Velthos said. The Sindari proposal. All in favor of authorizing the annexation of Earth. One by one, the representatives raised their hands or tentacles or whatever they used for such gestures. 10 in favor. 1 abstention from a minor species too weak to matter. And 1 opposed. Mithras lowered his hand made of light. Then it is decided, Velthos said. The fleet leaves within the cycle. You will regret this, Mithras said. His voice was sad, not angry. Not today. Perhaps not even soon. But one day, you will remember that I warned you. And by then, it will be far too late. He faded from the chamber, returning to wherever ancient beings of light go when they are tired of being ignored. Velthos smiled his broken glass smile and began giving orders. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet that did not know its fate had just been decided, life continued as normal. In a military monitoring station built into the side of a mountain in Korea, Lieutenant Yuna was working the night shift. She was 26 years old, good at her job, and very tired. Her coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. The screens in front of her showed the same thing they always showed. Satellites moving in their orbits, planes crossing the sky, nothing unusual. Then something unusual happened. A light appeared on her screen. Then another. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Yuna sat up straight. She ran the numbers 3 times because they could not be right. The objects were not on any flight plan. They were not satellites. They were coming from outside the solar system, moving at speeds that should have been impossible. She picked up the phone and called her commanding officer. Captain Taiho, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I think you need to see this. 20 minutes later, Taiho stood beside her, watching the same screen. His face was pale. His hands were shaking slightly. How many? He asked. 217, Yuna replied. They just dropped out of. I don't know what to call it. They were not there, and then they were. Hyperspace, Taiho said quietly. They came from hyperspace. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky was turning orange and pink, beautiful and peaceful. Neither of them looked at it. They just kept watching the screen as the lights grew closer. The invasion of Earth had begun. The message came on every frequency at once. Every television, every radio, every phone on the planet received it at the same moment. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated into every human language simultaneously. People of Earth, I am High Marshal Draven of the Sindari Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You have 1 planetary rotation to surrender unconditionally. Your governments will be dissolved. Your population will be catalogued and assigned to labor colonies across the galaxy. Resistance will result in the destruction of your largest population centers. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. Then the sky went dark. The Sindari fleet arranged itself in a ring around the planet, blocking out the stars. 200 ships, each one larger than any human city. They hung in the sky like gods looking down at insects. The world's governments reacted in different ways. Some called for immediate surrender. What choice did they have against such power? Others denied the message was real, calling it a hoax or a test. A few, very quietly, began making preparations. Captain Taiho was reassigned within hours. A helicopter took him from the mountain station to a bunker deep underground, where representatives from 12 nations had gathered around a metal table covered with maps and screens. There he met the others. Dr. Hana was small and thin, with glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She was a linguist who had spent 15 years studying signals from space, preparing for a moment she never truly believed would come. Now that it had, her hands would not stop shaking. Sergeant Jisoo stood against the wall, saying nothing. She was tall and strong, with short black hair and eyes that looked like they had seen too much. 12 hours ago, she had been on leave, visiting her mother and sister in Bizin. Then, the Sindari had demonstrated their power by firing a single shot from orbit. The city was gone now. So was her family. What do we know? Taiho asked. Their ships use some form of energy shielding, said an American general. Our missiles might not even scratch them. Their weapons can level a city from orbit in seconds, added a Russian colonel. We cannot match that. Then we surrender? Someone asked. No. The voice came from Jisoo. Everyone turned to look at her. We do not surrender. Not ever. Not to them. Sergeant, with respect, what choice do we have? Jisoo walked to the table and looked at the map. Her face showed no emotion, but her voice was hard as iron. They think we are weak because we are small. They think we will break because we are afraid. They do not know us. They do not know what we become when we have nothing left to lose. She looked at each person in the room. They burned my city. They killed my family. I will make them pay for that. And if I die trying, at least I will die fighting. At least I will make them bleed. The room was silent. Then Taiho spoke. She is right. If we surrender, we die slowly in their labor camps. If we fight, maybe we still die. But maybe, just maybe, we hurt them badly enough that they think twice before doing this to another world. How? Hannah asked. Her voice was quiet but curious. How do we fight something like that? Taiho smiled. It was not a happy smile. We cheat. The plan came together in hours. It was desperate and probably insane, but it was the only plan they had. The Sindari expected surrender. They expected humans to come out with their hands raised, ready to accept their new masters. They did not expect what happened next. Deep beneath the oceans, submarines that had been silent for decades received new orders. Nuclear missiles that had been pointed at each other for 50 years were now pointed at the sky. The first strike hit at exactly midnight, coordinated across every time zone. 17 nuclear warheads detonated against the forward scout vessels of the Sindari fleet. The shields held against most of them, but not all. 17 ships fell burning from the sky. High Marshal Draven watched from his command vessel as pieces of his fleet crashed into the planet below. His gray face showed surprise, then amusement, then cold fury. They fight, he said. How entertaining. How pointless. Orders, High Marshal? Asked his second in command. Burn their military installations. All of them. Show them the price of defiance. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, turning military bases into craters. Missiles launched in response, most of them shot down before they left the atmosphere. Over they left the atmosphere. The humans were losing. Everyone knew they were losing, but they were not losing as fast as they should have been. While the obvious attacks happened, other things were happening quietly. Communication satellites that the Sindari ignored suddenly became weapons, broadcasting frequencies that overloaded the neural implants many Sindari officers used. Industrial lasers in factories, designed for cutting metal, were modified and pointed at the sky. Container ships loaded with radioactive waste sailed toward coordinates, where enemy vessels were expected to land. The Sundari landed ground troops in major cities, expecting quick occupation. Instead, they found empty streets and booby traps. Buildings collapsed on top of them. Tunnels led them into ambushes. Vehicles exploded without warning. Hannah worked around the clock, listening to intercepted Sundari communications. Their language was strange, but language was just patterns, and patterns could be learned. Within days, she could understand basic orders. Within weeks, she could predict movements. Taiho coordinated what was left of the military from bunkers that kept moving. Every time the Sundari found one, he was already gone. He learned to think like a ghost. Jisoo did what she did best. She killed the enemy. She trained others to kill the enemy. She became a legend in the resistance. The woman who had walked into a Sundari camp alone and walked out with 30 human prisoners and a captured alien rifle. The battle for Earth was not going well, but it was going better than anyone had expected. High Marshal Draven received reports every day, and every day the reports confused him. The humans should have given up by now. They were outmatched in every way. Their cities were burning, their armies were scattered, their leaders were hiding in holes in the ground, but they kept fighting. They kept fighting with weapons, made from farm equipment and kitchen supplies. They kept fighting with tactics that made no military sense. They kept fighting even when they had no hope of winning. For the first time in his long career, Draven felt something unfamiliar. He felt the beginning of doubt. In the bunker. Surrounded by screens showing a world on fire, Taiho looked at his small team. Hannah, who had not slept in 3 days. Jisoo, who had not smiled since Bizen, and a handful of others who had refused to give up. They expected us to break, he said. We did not break. Now we make them pay for their mistake. Outside, the bombs kept falling. The aliens kept advancing. The situation kept getting worse. But somewhere in the darkness, humanity was learning to fight back, and the Sundari were about to learn what that meant. 6 months had passed since the sky fell. Seoul was gone. Not destroyed completely, but broken. The tall buildings that once touched the clouds were now skeletons of steel and concrete. The streets that once held millions of people were empty, haunted by shadows and memories. But beneath the ruins, life continued. Taiho led a resistance cell of 43 fighters from a bunker 3 levels underground. It had once been a subway station. Now it was a home, a hospital, and a command center. The walls were covered with maps showing enemy positions. The air smelled like sweat and determination. Hannah had set up her equipment in a corner, surrounded by wires and screens. She spent her days listening to Sundari communications, translating their words, predicting their movements. She had learned their language well enough now that she sometimes dreamed in it. Jisoo was rarely in the bunker. She preferred the surface, moving through the ruins like a predator hunting prey. She had trained a team of 20 fighters who followed her without question. They called themselves the Ghosts, and the Sundari had learned to fear them. Every night brought new attacks. Bridges exploded. Supply convoys vanished. Officers went to sleep and never woke up. The Sundari had expected to control the planet within weeks. Instead, they found themselves fighting for every street, every building, every meter of ground. But the cost was terrible. For every Sundari soldier who fell, 10 humans died. For every small victory, there were a dozen defeats. The resistance had weapons taken from dead enemies and ammunition that was running low. They had medicine that was almost gone and food that was barely enough. Taiho knew they could not win this way. They were bleeding the enemy, yes, but they were bleeding themselves faster. We need something bigger, he told his team one night. One strike that changes everything. One mission that matters. What do you suggest? Hannah asked. She looked exhausted. They all did. Draven, Taiho said. High Marshal Draven. He commands the entire occupation. If we take him down, their whole structure falls apart. His flagship never lands, Jisoo said. She was cleaning her rifle, not looking up. It stays in orbit. We cannot reach it. Maybe we can, Hana said slowly. Everyone turned to look at her. I have been listening to their communications for months. I know things. I know the Draven comes down to the surface sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. And I know when and where the next time will be. She pulled up a map on her screen. 3 days from now. An old government building they have turned into a regional command center. Draven is coming to personally oversee an interrogation. She paused. They captured someone important? Someone from our side. Who? Taiho asked. Hana looked at the floor. Me. The room went silent. What do you mean? Jisoo asked, her voice suddenly sharp. They do not know what I look like, Hana explained. But they know someone has been intercepting their communications. They have been hunting for this person for months. I can give myself up. I can let them capture me. And when Draven comes to see the prisoner who caused him so much trouble. No, Taiho said immediately. Absolutely not. It is the only way to get close to him. It is a suicide mission. Maybe. Hana finally looked up, and there was something fierce in her eyes. Or maybe it is the mission that saves us all. They argued for hours. In the end, they came up with a different plan. Hana would still be the bait, but she would not be alone. Jisoo and her ghosts would be waiting. Taiho would coordinate from outside. The moment Draven arrived, they would strike. It was still a desperate plan. It was still probably suicide. But at least they would all face it together. 3 days later, Hana walked into a Sindari checkpoint and surrendered. The guards were confused at first. Humans usually ran or fought. They did not simply give themselves up. But Hana told them exactly who she was and what she had done. And within hours, she was in a cell beneath the command center, waiting for the High Marshal. She waited for 2 days. The cell was small and dark. They did not feed her much. They asked her questions she did not answer. They hit her sometimes, trying to make her talk. She stayed silent and counted the hours. On the 3rd day, the door opened, and High Marshal Draven walked in. He was taller than she expected. His gray skin seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. His black eyes studied her like she was an insect under glass. You are the one who has been listening to us, he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Such a small creature. Such a fragile thing. And yet you have caused me so much trouble. I am just the beginning, Hana said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. There are thousands like me. Millions. You cannot kill us all. We do not need to kill you all, Draven replied. Only enough to break your will. And I think watching you die slowly will help with that. He turned to leave. One more thing, Hana said. Draven paused. You should check your roof. The explosion came a second later. The ceiling cracked. Dust fell like rain. And through the chaos, Jisoo dropped into the room like an angel of death. She killed 2 guards before they could raise their weapons. A 3rd managed to fire once before her knife found his throat. Then she was at Hana's side, cutting her chains, pulling her to her feet. Time to go, Jisoo said. Draven was shouting orders. More guards were coming. But the ghosts were everywhere now, flowing through the building like water, creating chaos and confusion. Taiho's voice came through their earpieces. The shuttle bay. North side. 30 seconds. They ran. Jisoo led the way, shooting anything that moved. Hana stumbled behind her, weak from days without food, but refusing to slow down. Around them, the building was falling apart, fire spreading, soldiers screaming. The shuttle bay was chaos. Sindari were trying to evacuate, pushing each other aside to reach the ships. Jisoo did not hesitate. She fought her way to the nearest shuttle, cleared it with brutal efficiency, and shoved Hana inside. "Can you fly this?" Hana asked. "We are about to find out." The shuttle lifted off just as Sundari reinforcements arrived. Energy beams scorched the air around them. One hit the tail, sending them spinning. But Jisoo was a fast learner, and within seconds, she had stabilized. They rose into the sky, leaving the burning command center behind. "Did we get him?" Hana asked. "Did we kill Draven?" Jisoo shook her head. "No, he escaped. But we got something better." She pointed at a device attached to the shuttle's control panel. A small black box, blinking with alien lights. The navigation database. Every Sundari military position. Every supply route. Every weakness in their entire empire. Hana stared at the box. Then she started to laugh. It was a strange sound, broken and exhausted, but real. "They came to conquer us," she said. Jisoo allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Now we are going to conquer them." 2 years had passed since the first ships appeared in Earth's sky. The planet was still wounded. Cities were still rebuilding. Millions were still mourning. But something had changed. Humanity was no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The navigation database they had stolen changed everything. It showed them where the Sundari were weak. It showed them where they were strong. It showed them the paths through space that connected the Empire like blood vessels in a body. More importantly, it showed them how Sundari technology worked. Human scientists worked day and night, taking apart captured equipment, studying every piece. They learned how the shields worked. They learned how the engines bent space. They learned, and then they built. The first human starship was ugly. It looked like a box with engines stuck to it, nothing like the elegant Sundari vessels. But it flew. It fought. And when it destroyed a Sundari patrol ship in Earth's orbit, the message was clear. Humanity was coming. Admiral Taiho stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's first true warship. The title felt strange to him. 2 years ago, he had been a captain watching strange lights on a screen. Now he commanded a fleet of 12 ships and 30,000 soldiers. Jisoo was there too, now a general. She had traded her knife for a fleet of assault transports and an army of soldiers who had been trained by the best. Guerrilla fighters Earth had produced. Hana was still not a soldier. She was humanity's first real diplomat, using her knowledge of alien languages to reach out to others who had suffered under Sundari rule, because that was the secret they had discovered in the navigation database. The Sundari were not alone in the galaxy. Dozens of species lived under their control. Most had been conquered long ago, their spirits broken, their hopes crushed. But now there was a new story spreading through the stars. A story about a small blue planet that had refused to die. A story about creatures who fought back against impossible odds. A story about something called Hope. The Velthari were the first to answer Hana's call. They were massive beings, twice the height of humans, with skin like dark stone. The Sundari used them as laborers, building the ships that conquered their worlds. But they remembered freedom. They remembered what it meant to choose their own fate. The Kasori came next. They were small and quick, with forearms and minds that processed information faster than computers. The Sundari used them as technicians, keeping the machines running. But they also remembered. And they were tired of serving masters who saw them as tools. Others followed. Species whose names humans could barely pronounce. Worlds that humans had never heard of. All of them had the same story. The Sundari came, the Sundari conquered, the Sundari ruled. And everyone had forgotten that there was any other way. Until now. The first major battle happened at a Sundari shipyard orbiting a dead star. The shipyard built the vessels that kept Earth under siege. Destroying it would cripple the occupation. Taiho's fleet arrived at dawn. If dawn meant anything in the endless night of space, the Sindari were waiting. 30 ships against humanity's 12. The numbers were bad. The odds were worse. All ships, this is Admiral Taiho. His voice was calm over the communication system. We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. The enemy expects us to run or surrender. Let us show them what humans do when someone tells us we cannot win. The battle began. Human ships fought differently than Sindari vessels. They were smaller, faster, harder to hit. They used tactics that seemed insane until they worked. Pilots performed maneuvers that should have killed them, pushing their bodies beyond what any species thought possible. Jusu led the ground assault. Her transports dodged through the crossfire, landing on the shipyard's surface while the space battle raged above. Her soldiers poured out, fighting through corridors filled with enemy troops. But they were not alone. The workers on the shipyard, the Valkyrie and Kasori, who had built Sindari weapons all their lives, rose up. They turned on their guards. They opened locked doors. They sabotaged the very ships they had been forced to create. By the end, the shipyard was burning. 15 Sindari vessels were destroyed. The occupation fleet above Earth would receive no reinforcements, and something else happened. Something more important than any military victory. Word spread. The slaves had seen it themselves. The humans did not treat them as new subjects. They did not claim the shipyard for themselves. They offered something that no one had offered in 10,000 years. Partnership. Hana stood before a gathering of freed workers. Speaking words, her translation device turned into a dozen languages. We did not come to rule you, she said. We came to free you. What you do with that freedom is your choice. But if you want to fight with us, if you want to end the Sindari Empire forever, then stand with us. Not behind us, beside us. As equals, the Valkyrie elder stepped forward. He was old, scarred from decades of labor, but his eyes were bright. We have waited many lifetimes for someone to say those words, he said. You have our strength. The Kasori representative clicked her agreement. And our minds. Others joined. Species that had been enemies now united. Worlds that had been divided now connected. A coalition was forming. Something the galaxy had not seen since before the Sindari rose to power. Back on the Nexus station, the Galactic Council watched in growing horror. The reports made no sense. Humans were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to break. Instead, they were spreading through the stars like a fire that could not be contained. Elder Mithras attended the emergency session, but said nothing. His light flickered as he watched his colleagues panic. He had warned them. They had not listened. Now they were seeing the price of their arrogance. They are liberating our labor worlds, one ambassador said. Our economies will collapse. They are destroying our military installations, another added. We cannot replace our losses fast enough. This is your fault, a third shouted at the Sindari representative. You said they would be easy to control. The Sindari representative had no answer. On the bridge of the Defiance, Taiho looked at the star map. So many lights. So many worlds. So many beings who had forgotten that freedom was possible. How far do we go? Jisoo asked. She stood beside him, as she always did now. As far as we need to, Taiho replied. Until no one else has to live under their rule. That could take years, decades. Then it takes decades. He turned to face her. We did not ask for this war, but since it came to us, we will finish it. Not for revenge, not for power, for everyone who ever looked up at the stars and wished that someone would help. Jisoo nodded slowly. The girl from Bizin would not recognize me now. The captain from the mountain station would not recognize me either. Taiho almost smiled. But here we are. Here we are, Jisoo agreed. Outside the viewport, the stars waited. So many battles still to fight. So many worlds still to free. So many lives still hanging in the balance. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity was not just surviving. They were winning. 5 years had passed since the Sindari first appeared above Earth. Their empire was burning. The coalition that humanity had built now stretched across 300 worlds. Velthari warriors fought beside human soldiers. Kisori engineers kept the ships flying. A dozen other species had joined, each bringing their own strengths, their own stories, their own reasons to fight. And now, finally, it was ending. Admiral Taiho stood on the bridge of the Defiance as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the Sindari homeworld. It was a beautiful planet, he had to admit. Blue and green, much like Earth. The species that had tried to enslave his people had come from somewhere just as lovely. Beside him stood General Jisoo, her face hard as stone. 5 years of war had changed her. She was older now, with gray in her hair and scars on her hands. But her eyes still burned with the same fire that had carried her through the ruins of Seoul. And there was Hana, no longer a translator hiding in bunkers, but the voice of the coalition. She spoke for humanity and for all the species who had joined them. When she talked, governments listened. How many ships? Taiho asked. 47 in orbit, his tactical officer replied. Another 100 on the surface. But most of them are damaged or running low on power. They have nothing left. Then we offer them a choice. The communication went out across all frequencies, just as Draven's ultimatum had gone out 5 years ago. But this time, the words were different. People of the Sindari homeworld. This is Admiral Taiho of the Human Coalition. We have not come to destroy you. We have come to end this war. Your leaders brought death to our world. Now they must answer for their crimes. Surrender the high command, and no civilians will be harmed. You have 1 hour to decide. The hour passed slowly. When the answer came, it was not surrender. It was one final attack. The remaining Sindari ships launched from the surface, screaming toward the coalition fleet in a desperate assault. The battle was short and brutal. Coalition ships had learned too much, become too strong. Within minutes, the Sindari fleet was shattered. But one ship escaped the battle. High Marshal Draven's flagship, running for the edge of the system, trying to reach hyperspace. Should we pursue? Jisoo asked. Taiho shook his head. No need. A Velthari battleship appeared directly in Draven's path, blocking his escape. Then a Kisori cruiser. Then 3 more coalition vessels. Everywhere Draven turned, another ship was waiting. His voice came over the communication channel, tired and broken. I surrender. They found him on his bridge, alone. His crew had abandoned him hours ago, slipping away in escape pods. The great High Marshal, who had once threatened to burn Earth to ashes, was just an old gray alien sitting in an empty chair. Jisoo wanted to kill him. She had every right. He had given the order that destroyed Bizen. He had killed millions. He had laughed at human defiance. But Taiho stopped her. He does not get to die here, he said. He gets to stand trial. He gets to see what his arrogance cost. He gets to watch as everything he built falls apart. They took him to the Nexus Station, to the Great Black Hall where the Galactic Council had once voted to conquer Earth. The chamber looked different now. Many seats were empty. Some species had fled. Others had fallen. The 12 who had ruled the galaxy were now barely 6. The remaining council members watched as Draven was brought before them in chains. They watched as representatives from 300 liberated worlds filled the gallery. They watched as the species they had dismissed as primitive took control of the floor. Elder Mithras appeared for the first time in years. His light was dim, fading. Even ancient beings made of energy eventually run out. "I told you," he said to his colleagues. "I told you what would happen. You did not believe me." He turned to face the human delegation. "And now the question remains. What will you do with your victory? You have the power to destroy us, to become the new masters of the galaxy, to do to others what was done to you." The chamber was silent. Hannah stepped forward. She was small compared to most beings in the room, fragile, short-lived, exactly as they had dismissed her species 5 years ago. But when she spoke, her voice filled the whole. "We come from a world where we spent thousands of years fighting each other," she said. "We know what war costs. We know what happens when the powerful prey on the weak. We have done it ourselves, to our own kind." She paused, looking at the assembled species. "We could take your empire. We have the strength. Many would say we have the right. You tried to enslave us. You killed millions of our people. You would have destroyed our civilization without a second thought." The council members looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "But that is not why we fought. We did not cross the stars for revenge. We did not build a coalition for conquest. We came because someone had to stand up and say enough. Someone had to show the galaxy that there is another way." She took a deep breath. "We will not rule you. We will not subjugate you. We will not become the monsters we defeated. Instead, we offer you the same thing we offered everyone who joined us: partnership, freedom, a chance to build something better together." Taiho stepped forward beside her. "But we will not forget. And we will not allow this to happen again." The Galactic Council failed. It must be rebuilt with new rules. Every species gets a voice. Every world gets protection. No one will be too weak to matter. "And if someone breaks these rules?" Elder Mithras asked. Jisoo spoke for the first time. "Then humanity will be there, not as conquerors, as protectors. We have learned how to fight, and we will use that knowledge to defend those who cannot defend themselves." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Volturi representative rose and stood beside the humans. Then the Kasori. Then others, species after species, until the gallery was standing and the old council was surrounded by the new. Elder Mithras looked at the scene before him. A galaxy that had been built on fear and conquest was being remade into something different. Something that might actually last. "Perhaps," he said softly, "this was meant to happen all along. Perhaps the universe needed humanity, not as a threat, but as a lesson." He began to fade, his light growing dimmer. "Remember us, humans. Remember the mistakes we made. And try not to make them yourselves." Then he was gone. On Earth, rebuilding continued. The scars would take generations to heal. Cities still bore the marks of orbital bombardment. Graves still held millions who had died in the occupation. Memories still haunted those who had survived. But the sky looked different now. Children pointed upward at night, not with fear, but with wonder. Those lights were not invaders anymore. They were friends, partners, proof that humanity was not alone and never would be again. Taiho retired after the war. He found a small house in the mountains, not far from where he had first seen the invasion fleet. He spent his days watching the sunset and his nights watching the stars. Jisoo could not stop fighting. She became the commander of a defense force that patrolled the old Sundari borders, making sure the peace held. She never laughed, never celebrated. But sometimes, late at night, she looked at pictures of Bizen before the fire and allowed herself to remember. Hana became the first human ambassador to the new Galactic Council. She spent her life building bridges between species, translating not just languages but ideas. When she finally passed, beings from 100 worlds attended her memorial. And throughout the galaxy, the story spread. The story of a small blue planet that should have fallen but did not. The story of a species that fought when they should have surrendered. The story of humans who could have become conquerors but chose to be protectors instead. The Zendari had come to teach humanity its place in the universe. Instead, humanity had taught the universe something far more important. That hope never dies. That courage is contagious. And that sometimes, the smallest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. The stars burned on, as they always had. But now, humanity burned with them.